Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Computer Weekly Downtime Upload podcast. I'm Cliff Saran and my guest today is Ranjit Atwal from Gartner. Just to get things started, Ranjit, and to make sure that we're on the same page, can you just explain to our readers, our viewers and our listeners what's actually happening on October the 14th this year?
Yeah. Hello to everyone. And on October the 14th, it's going to be the end of live support for Windows 10, which essentially means that there will be no security updates on Windows 10. There'll be no more bug fixes, performance enhancements from that day forward across all of the fleet of PCs that organizations own. So there's a major change.
What do we do? I mean, if you wanted to carry on running? I mean, I've heard that there's this thing called extended support. And why is extended support so important, given that Microsoft does publish this date, October the 14th, 2025? We've known that for years. In fact, we knew that since Windows 11 came out. That's when Windows 10 will end support. So we've had a long time, but why are we looking at extended support? Why is that important?
Yeah, it's a bridge, it's a safety bridge really for organizations. So whilst everybody is aware of the date, they may not have been organized enough, or there may be other reasons. They may have some legacy applications that they still need to run, so they haven't been able to move all of their machines over to Windows 11. So whatever the reasons are, it's trying to mitigate any risk around, especially security. So they provide extended support. It's paid for. Some organizations, a small percentage of organizations will adopt that to ensure that they have this kind of bridge to make sure that they don't fall between the cracks in terms of where they're going.
I think the acronym is ESU, extended support. I mean, is it relevant in a totally air-gapped environment or in an embedded environment that is not network connected?
It can be. So, those environments are, as you say, they're locked in. They're not exposed to external environment in most ways, but the user can still bring in something. As they can use a USB, so they can bring in some other type of malicious software. So depending on the users and how well that is organized or mandated, that still is a good way to, again, it's mitigating risk. And it's up to the organization saying, okay, how well do we want to do this? Because at the end of the day, if you have a security issue, it's probably worth getting that ESU insurance to cover yourselves.
Okay, just moving on a little bit. I mean, I don't really get why we need to upgrade operating systems at all. I have no idea why that is an important thing for the industry to do.
Well, it's really interesting because I remember when Windows 10 came out after Windows 7, and Microsoft, I'm sure, said this is going to be the last big operating system upgrade that we're going to do. This is it.
They did. I remember that. They were talking about over-the-air update. You'll never need to upgrade you'll never need to do a major upgrade again.
Right. So this was it. There's no Windows 11. Effectively, they said there's no Windows 11. After Windows 10. So we kind of took that for gospel, saying, okay, this is the last upgrade. But I think what they've found is a couple of things. One is, and we'll come on to this a little bit more, but there's so much legacy software and peripherals that is supported through the operating system that at some point that's just become too much in terms of the code and the size of what they're trying to do, updates every time. So that's the kind of one aspect of it. So what can we drop? On the other side, they may have realized actually with AI coming and features and maybe even the UI and conversational AI and different ways you want to interact with the device, that wasn't built in the way they wanted it built into Windows 10, and then Windows 11 in terms of the features and functionality that they want to introduce is a easier step change rather than introducing new updates through Windows 10. So they've decided, let's do this step change. We'll support as much of the legacy as we can, dropping off where we need to. And there's a lot of legacy applications as well. The important thing I think here is more forward-looking as to what might come through Windows 11 around AI features, around AI capabilities, as they start falling through from the cloud onto the device as well over the next years as they use their PC. So that's kind of the shift that's happening, and it's a combination of those things.
I know you've mentioned AI a few times, but before we start talking about AI, is this just a Windows thing? I mean, obviously there's macOS and there's various Linux desktop operating systems. Do these also need to be upgraded? Not obviously at the same time as Windows, but do they need to be upgraded?
So the way that I suppose to think about this is the setup, the way Mac is set up in terms of they control the end-to-end capabilities and now silicon as well, which they didn't a few years back. So now from silicon through to the applications, through to the software, and the hardware is controlled by them completely end-to-end. And also they, as a result of that, they have essentially a closed ecosystem. Now they support other applications, but function in terms of what they're managing is a much smaller set of applications and peripherals and capabilities. And they will move and they may drop something, whereas the Windows environment is much, much bigger and supports so much legacy, going back to applications that probably run, that were manufactured back in the 80s or 70s even. So they have a responsibility around that because of the way they support businesses. Whereas Mac or other OSs just don't have that complexity, and they have the manageability across the board. So it's a different environment that they are trying to manage. So it's really not kind of like for like there.
Okay, I mean, are you seeing much interest in ARM-based PCs?
It's interesting. So again, I think maybe going back to Microsoft here. So Microsoft, they partnered with Qualcomm to launch the Copilot Plus PCs last year, to try and get my years right. And one of the things they wanted to launch at that same time was something called Recall, which is an AI application in terms of memorizing what's happening on your PC. It didn't quite work out. But it's interesting that Microsoft are kind of driving that partnership and driving ARM onto mainstream PCs. So that's different from where we were maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when kind of ARM kind of was around the edges and we thought that'd be interesting. In terms of businesses, they are evaluating ARM and they're looking at, okay, is this a viable platform? The issue is not all of the applications that they need to run on ARM run at the moment. A large majority of them do. So that needs to kind of work its way through. It's a viable platform they're finding. And they are, in fact, and then the point is, they're looking at Intel, AMD, Qualcomm, and maybe there's others down the road. So, different from 5 years ago, we now have choices. And that's important. That's important moving forward in terms of maybe how the applications run, what they want to optimize. So it's in evaluation at the moment. We expect over the next 12 months more applications to come through and be verified. And we'll see what happens in terms of the relationship between Microsoft and Qualcomm as to how that grows. So it's a much more of a viable choice, which I don't think we had even 5 years ago.
But I want to just move on a little bit and ask you a little bit about if you're seeing any interest at all in AI PCs.
Yeah, the interest is So there's a huge amount of interest from the vendor community, as you would expect. There's a huge amount of interest from the PC ecosystem, Microsoft, Intel, the ones we've just been mentioning. They have been over-optimistic about how the success of the AI PC from not necessarily adoption, but price point. So what they wanted was this AI PC is a premium PC. It's going to run AI applications in the word that you just used in the most optimal way. And you will see these huge benefits. But what's happened in reality is that they found it difficult to get that premium. It's still a little bit, it is more expensive, but not quite the premium they were after. And then organizations are looking at this as we expect about a third of PCs to be AI PCs this year because, most of the vendors are pushing them out there. And organizations are looking at this as future-proofing. So they buy a PC today. They're just, we're talking about moving to Windows 11. They buy a PC today. They're going to keep that PC for 4 years. Over that 4 years, they're going to be executing more and more AI applications. So it depends on the organizations and where they are in their AI strategy to then think about, okay, if we buy these AI PCs today, and then will we be utilizing them more and more over the lifetime of keeping these PCs? So a lot of interest from the vendors, growing interest from the users, and then really kind of working out where we're going to use more of the AI capabilities. And then the question is, what am I going to pay for this? And that's where the battle is at the moment, because they're saying we're not going to pay, 20% more because we don't see the value. So there is a bit of an uplift, and that's the kind of the market that we're in at the moment.
Sorry, I'm thinking aloud a little bit here.
Sure.
But because I was looking at my next question, which is about browser based, and AI in the cloud is I guess the easiest entry point to get into AI, but it can be quite costly. And I guess pushing AI to the edge, if you have got powerful enough hardware at the edge, which is being a PC, you can do a lot of local processing, and that may be of benefit to some organizations, both in terms of, I guess, regulatory compliance, where they're not able to put data into the public cloud and use it and use an LLM there, or purely for cost.
Yeah. So privacy, security, customization, the latency of using on device, that's all known. That this is the benefits. So what they're waiting for is the applications and the small language models that are being they're coming out in every day, and again the optimization of those small language models to run on device. So it's not necessarily that they're going to be these language models, like small language models, are going to be necessarily get bigger and then they can run, but it's just the optimization of how well they can run on device. That's happening at the moment. So this goes back to the AI PC point, is that the hardware has almost come ahead. It's kind of the horse and cart, kind of scenario. It's almost come ahead of what we're seeing with applications. That's kind of generally what we're seeing around Gen AI. They're saying in the press that we're heading for the trough in terms of Gen AI. This is a bubble that's going to burst. That's all because everyone's running a little bit ahead of the maturity of the market. The market's not maturing fast enough for them to get the results, and that's very similar with where we are with AI PCs. So they've got to let the two kind of align and catch up, which is always a difficult thing when you're trying to get benefits for the organization.
Well, I want to sort of roll back the clock and then take us right to the present day. But I mean, I remember writing about PC management when Gartner shook the industry and said that PCs cost $5,000 a year to run, and then it went up to 9,000 or 8,000, or something ridiculously high. And it really made IT managers quite worried that this was a cost that they had no idea existed, or if they did, they didn't want to tell anyone about it.
Yes.
I mean, what is your sort of tips? What's your top tips for IT management and CIOs to help them manage their PC estate in a way that's cost effective?
I think the first one is segmentation of your user base, understanding what is the mix of your user base, who uses what applications, how often do they use them, then understanding or trying to be proactive about the issues that might be coming up for those individual user bases. Because often, the users are running ahead of what the IT department is preparing for them to actually access. So that segmentation is important, because then you can allocate the right machines to the right individuals. Secondly, there was a decrease in mobility through COVID, and at the other side, now as people return back to work, that mobility aspect is going to not come back to pre-COVID, but increase again. So looking at the type of laptops that you might buying, weight of those and then also looking at kind of the cameras within those laptops and mobility generally and how that fits together. And then really it's kind of thinking about how many assets do you want to actually own? So if we go back even 10 years, businesses where we don't want to own any assets, and yet most of them still own PCs. So they haven't managed to get rid of that PC. So okay, they're still going to own assets, PCs especially. So now the question is, how much of that manageability do you want to outsource? So what kind of support do you want to get on a consistent basis from either your vendors or service providers that then decrease the pressures on the IT departments, because effectively they need to be dealing with how to increase the experience of the user. And that's the last part. The last part is now about the experience of the user. It's not the hardware, which is pretty standard. Now it's about, as you go through the use of the PC, how are you going to enhance the experience of the user? And that kind of ties into what HR might be doing in terms of the overall experience of the user. And most IT departments are far too isolated rather than integrated into the organization and how they work to help manage and enhance the product. Productivity is a kind of big word, but the experience of product. So there's a number of steps that they need to move through where, yes, we procured this, and that's not the big part. The procurement is not the big part here. The procurement actually, when it comes down to it, is probably the most sophisticated and well-known part of the exercise. So I think that thing is kind of moving beyond the hardware, thinking about the 4 years that you own the device, and then thinking about that TCO part, and also how you can then not only the PC is not only a cost, but how do you then use it as a benefit to the organization? At the moment, what happens is the users, they search, they find, they enhance their own individual experience, but it doesn't create an organizational uplift. And the whole AI part, you can wrap around that, because everyone's using all the different AI tools, but how do you then integrate those AI tools and get the organization to add them more readily into the workflow?
Oh, well, that's a very good point, Ranjit. It's I'll certainly take away the experience and what do we call it? Digital employee experience.
Yeah.
And I guess digital employee experience with AI, is that is possibly with the new AI PCs, is going to be what IT management will be looking at going forward, and how they can make the most of the new technology to improve how people work. But anyway, Ranjit, thank you ever so much for taking part in today's podcast.
No problem. Thank you very much for talking to you.
And thank you very much for tuning in. Goodbye.